Why pay for onboardings? The onboarding of a new client sets the tone for the working relationship between managed service provider and client. We're here to dive into the finer points of the why. My name is Rebecca Fenig, Project Coordinator for the Professional Services Department at Iron Edge. I play an active role in the planning and execution of onboarding projects, and I'm excited to be part of our discussion. I'm joined today by Dan Mallard, VP of Central Texas Client Experience. He is an account manager, bringing his nearly 20 years of information technology experience to his clients. Rebecca Greiser, Sales Executive, is skilled at recognizing client needs and identifying technology solutions. She's laser focused on delivering exceptional customer experiences. Welcome, Dan and Rebecca. Hope you're well today.
Hi, Rebecca. Hi,
Thank you.
Rebecca.
All right, let's get started. What does it mean to be properly onboarded? Dan, give us some detail here.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me set the stage so everybody kind of understands what we're talking about and why a little bit. So in our industry, which is as managed IT service providers, we take on new clients, and the process of taking on a new client and getting them set up for our support with all the tools that we use and getting our team the documentation that they need to support that new client, that's called onboarding, right? It's basically taking on your company as a client, putting our agents out on your computers and starting support, right? So that's what onboarding is. And sort of zoomed out, there's several benefits to being properly onboarded in the same methodology that we use, right? And there's three general benefits. I'm going to say them high level, and then we'll expand on those through the discussion. So number one, what we want to do working with our clients is we want to provide a great experience to them. We want our clients, from the time we start supporting them through their entire life of working with us, we want their team, their decision makers, their owners to have great experiences. So that's number one. If we've onboarded correctly and properly, then the new client of ours will have a great experience. And sort of 1B is we want our team to have a great experience as well, right? We want our team to have a really good experience taking on a new client, getting to know new people, and supporting their IT infrastructure. Second, the second thing that I want to talk about is if we properly onboarded a new client, we've got into their IT systems and we kind of understand their security posture, right? And some of those things we remediate, some of those things we do later, but that's incredibly important when you onboard a new client, because you want to understand what security should be focused on. Now, the third component, high level, of the third benefit of being properly onboarded is that if we've done our diligence through the onboarding process, we've painted a pretty reasonably accurate roadmap of the things we're going to need to focus on in a general IT sense and the things we need to budget for the next several years of that client working with us.
Rebecca, proper onboarding doesn't happen by itself. Talk to us about some of the costs and work associated with doing this well.
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to onboarding, when we're going out to client sites and we're meeting with prospects from the get-go, we have to be able to have an understanding of what their environment is. One of the ways that we do that is we conduct what we call a network assessment. It's not just coming and sticking a USB into a server, scanning the environment. There are hard costs that are associated with looking at that data, developing and designing whatever solution that we're putting in place from that data, and then building that out and coordinating with our internal team to execute that through that onboarding process.
At Iron Edge, we pride ourselves in giving great experiences.
Right.
What does the experience of an extended, well-vetted onboarding look like from a client's perspective? Dan?
Sure. Yeah, that's an excellent question. And I have a unique sort of way to look at answering it because I was a client. Years and years ago, I was a client of a managed services provider, right? So I can kind of look at this both from our perspective and from the client perspective. Now, our goal with a well executed onboarding is kind of our first goal. And what we talk about a lot is there's a day that we're going to start supporting that client. We're going to start supporting their end users on their computers. We're going to start supporting their network and server environment. We're going to start to support their cloud environment. All this stuff starts on a certain day. Well, our goal, if we've done this onboarding properly, when we start support of that client, say it's December 1st and we start support, we're going to start taking phone calls. We're going to start getting tickets, and we're going to start getting emails from that new client. And we want the new client staff and the people submitting those issues to get a great experience from us. And what we mean by that is when you call into us on the very first day, we want to know, we want our technical team, everybody that answers the phone, we want them to know what your business is, how it works, the basic networking infrastructure, the application layer. What are your core business applications and who supports those? How do you get support? We want our end user team to know any server infrastructure and cloud infrastructure, and in a general sense, how this stuff put together and how it helps your company. So if we've gone through this extended onboarding process well, we've gathered all that information. We've figured out what's important. We've trained our technical team, all of this before we start support. And then on the day we start support, our technical team has that information. They've heard it, they've been trained on it, and we have a knowledge base that we use that they can look up any related information immediately and really provide a great experience for the person that's calling in needing help.
That's excellent, because if a client is onboarded, but the proper vetting isn't done, the converse, I mean, it's a terrible situation, right? Mm-hmm. We've got the people on the help desk that don't know the client. They don't know what their network situation is. And they're doing discovery on the fly and documentation on the fly.
Documentation, right? Like either even recording it, right? Discovery on the fly it takes a lot of time. It's frustrating for the end users because we're trying to figure stuff out on the first or second phone call that somebody calls us. If somebody hasn't spent all that time up front, we're then trying to figure out, okay, I can't figure out why the network's not working. Let me try to figure out where the firewall is. What is its IP address? How does it work? How do I get into it? There's all these things that drastically make it a worse experience for an end user. And we alleviate that by spending normally 4 to 6 weeks before we even start support, gathering information like that, understanding the systems, documenting it, and having it ready for our team to just look those things up in our knowledge base. It pops up and they can help. We hear stories of, and I'm familiar with situations that are the opposite. Maybe Rebecca has too, Rebecca G. You can start service with a managed services provider without them doing all this front end work, right? They don't have to do it. Basically what they have to do is they have to push their support agents to every computer in your environment. That's really the basic task that has to be done. So if that's the case and you're with a different managed services provider and they say, okay, we're going to start support on December 1st. And you say, okay, what do you need before? And they go, oh, nothing. We're just going to push our agent out to your computer. Or when somebody calls us, then we'll install it. That is certainly something that happens in the real world. And we have very specifically decided not to do that and to invest in the time and energy that it takes to ramp up a new client into our infrastructure and to document them. And like Rebecca said earlier, Rebecca P said, there's a cost associated with that, with all of that effort, which ties us back around into the theme today. Why do we charge for an onboarding, right? And so that's one of the things we're talking about is there's actual hard costs of labor and tools that we use to do the process.
Yeah, and just to touch on that, Dan, one of the things that I've seen within the managed service industry, when it comes to the onboarding process and actually sending people on site, a lot of times, what I've seen and what I've experienced, at other providers is the fact that we'll deploy the agents, but there's no personal touch. Yeah. There's nobody that is there readily available in an office for the staff to grab and say, hey, I need help with this. And especially when it comes to switching over technology, moving to new platforms. And so part of that onboarding experience with Iron Edge Group is to ensure that there is that personal touch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. There's multiple people that someone would interface with through this onboarding process that normally goes 4 to 6 weeks, and then we start support, and then it goes another couple months afterwards. There's multiple people on our team that are involved. Your salesperson would be involved, which is Rebecca G, involved through the whole way. The pro services team and a subset of that team, which is the onboarding team, is involved through all of the documentation creation and information gathering on the front end, and then potentially remediating issues and then getting projects handed off to them. They're involved the whole time. Our support team has been introduced to you, and our VP of operations and your technical lead is involved on the front end of an onboarding. I'm involved as an account manager and representative of the company. I'm involved through the onboarding. So there's all these people and all this time and effort that we spend working with the new client to really do what Rebecca said, which is make them feel comfortable, let them understand how our team works, let them meet multiple people. And all of that effort, again, ties back into the why we charge for an onboarding and why it takes so much effort on our side, is because that's what we're aiming for. We want this great experience. We want all these terrific team members on our team to get involved. So when you start with us as a client, you're going to get a terrific experience. So that's our goal.
Let's touch on this subject of security.
Sure.
Cybersecurity is such an important factor for businesses. We hear on the news of breaches, passwords being exposed,
Right.
ransomware. Dan, how does proper onboarding benefit a client in regard to their security?
This is a good question, and I can give you some examples that I've actually seen of the opposite, right? So when we go through this onboarding process, the way it works is we're going to come in and we're going to understand the environment. First of all, our technicians are going to come in and they're going to understand what's the networking layer, what's the server layer, what's the cloud layer, what's the application layer in a general sense. And then in addition to that, in addition to understanding it and sort of mapping it out and documenting it, we get in and we understand sort of the core basic settings inside of those systems. For example, if you're using a cloud mail and collaboration platform like Office 365, like Microsoft 365, if you're using that, we're going to get in there and we're going to look at the very basic settings of that platform to understand if it's secure. We do the same thing for servers. We do the same things for virtual infrastructures, for backups, for networks. We want to understand the core setup of those systems. And then once we look at it, if we determine that there's very notable security flaws, we're going to note those, and some of those things are going to be remediated in our onboarding process. Now, not everything. It's a very complex security issue that requires some type of pro services team involvement and a statement of work and an actual project. That's a little bit different. We're going to attend to that as a future item, and we're going to bring it to your attention. But there's plenty of things that we can see within an environment that we need to raise our hand and say, new client, we want to show you something. This is an issue. We'd like to remediate it right away. Is that okay? And we do knock those things out through the actual onboarding process, which again, that's one of these reasons that we charge for an onboarding. I'll give you a very quick story of the opposite happening. So we take over new clients, and when we take over new clients, occasionally they've worked with an MSP before, right? Pretty common stuff. So every once in a while, we'll get in and we'll take over a new client, and we'll look in their existing systems. These systems have been in place for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years. We'll look in there, and they basically have the out-of-the-box settings of these systems. And I'll use the Office 365, Microsoft 365 solution for a second. We'll go in and we'll start working with a new client that has had Office 365, like the mail component or the SharePoint component, rolled out for years. And when we get in and look at the settings are literally the default settings that are in place from when the product is basically turned on. That may seem reasonable, but it's not, because there's a lot of security that should be enabled and turned on within those products that the client absolutely should have. But that wasn't done for whatever reason, by the former team or the former person and whatnot. So, tying it back into theme for today, there's all this effort and brain power and, architectural review of the systems that come before we even start support. And that's the real value that we bring, and why it's a notably complex process that is not just we're putting agents on and we're starting and you don't have to pay for it. All right.
We've talked about how paying for a great onboarding benefits clients. It provides a great experience, getting off on the right foot in our working relationship, setting the client and Iron Edge up for success.
Yep.
By tightening up security, it helps clients to sleep at night, right? So we're not going to lose our business. We're not going to lose money on this. So in addition to that, we talked a little bit, Dan, about what you called remediation, things that are identified during onboarding. And so another benefit of onboarding is future planning for our clients once they're established and onboarded with us, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've talked about it a little bit sort of leading up to this point. But if we've done all this understanding and vetting of the infrastructure correctly over the first 4 to 6 weeks that once we're engaged, my goal as the account manager, once we start supporting a new client, is I want to be able to propose a roadmap for the next 1 to 3 years of what technology initiatives we see from our initial 6-week review that we can put in front of the client, that they can start to consider, that they can start budgeting for from the time we start working with them. So while we go through this onboarding process and we're understanding what's where, we're understanding how it's secure, we're also taking into account if there's things that need to be remediated or modified through a project, we're documenting those. And the team prepares those things for me and presents them to me so I can then take them in front of the brand new client. Say, okay, as we went through the onboarding process, we noticed that this server was 10 years old. It's out of support. The operating system's gotten super old. The hardware specs are very, very old, and that server has a high likelihood to die, and it's not under support. So getting it attended to and fixed may take an extended amount of time. Those type of things are brought to our attention, and then we can take those things in front of the client within the first 30, 60, 90 days of us starting the support. I can take it in front of the stakeholder and say, here's the things we found. We found that this server's super old. It's not under support. There's a high likelihood it's going to die. So what do we need to do to plan to remediate that if it happens, or to lessen the risk of if it does happen? And that's just one example. There's any number of things that the team can bring that then we gather together. I meet with the client and we say, okay, here's all the things that we see with our industry experience and our hundreds of years of combined employee experience. Here's what we see. How does that fit within your vision of your company? How do these, we will oftentimes give estimated budget numbers, just super zoomed out budget numbers. How does this fit into your budgeting for IT? And how can we make this work over the next 3 years? And it's very, very important. But for us to have the architects and the people come in and understand your environment and be able to provide this to the account manager, whether it's me or somebody else, from the beginning, within six weeks of starting the engagement, that's a notable amount of effort and time. And again, that's tied back into why we're paying for the onboarding stuff. Is that's another product that comes out of it because we've invested the time, energy, and resources in the process.
Rebecca, talk to us about this from the perspective of a sales executive. When you're talking to clients and trying to convince them to come to us, we want to be your managed service provider. Is this something that you focus on?
It absolutely is. It's like laying the groundwork or the foundation of the relationship. You have to be able to identify what the needs are. You have to be that consultative partner for the client. And so throughout the sales process, we are, spending that time with the key players. We're discussing the needs that we see that are present. We are building out a solution, through planning and the IT strategy roadmap that Dan mentioned for that client to get them to the level. And then, to touch a little bit on the onboarding process, and what we typically see is we have the plan in place where we have deadlines and deliverables of key areas that need to be rectified right off the bat, but nobody really knows what's going on with an environment until you're working with the environment. And so through future planning, whether it's on the sales side, as we have discovered and done our due diligence, or it's on the account management side, we provide a strategic roadmap and process for addressing those needs, identifying those needs, and helping the companies that we work with really budget and plan it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that is, you compare that to sort of the free onboarding where somebody shows up, they push out their agents, and they start support. There's a big difference between having your environment documented and understood, having the support team that's about to get you cross-trained with a wiki made of all the information, having basic security reviewed, remediated, and future initiatives determined, and then anything else revealed within the understanding the environment with some type of plan and a roadmap for the next 3 years. There's that, and there's that thing that you could get, or you could have somebody come in and not charge for an onboarding to play their agents and be off and running. Really, it's what you value more.
Onboarding is not a one-size-fits-all project. It's really important. And I'm so glad that we've got these two perspectives of the sales side and then the account management side, because both provide such value to these clients as we're bringing them on and building our relationship.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
All right. In closing, we have talked about some great benefits to an extended, well-vetted onboarding. It is involving costs, it is involving resources, but it is so valuable to the client. Dan, wrap us up here. Any final points?
Yeah, the final point I would have is specifically at Iron Edge, we feel like our onboarding process and what we've developed procedurally, which we described today, which maybe I shouldn't have explained all that so everybody understands what we do and then they steal it. But we feel like that's a differentiator between us and some of our competition for sure. And we also feel strongly that it's very, very important. Someone's first experience with us, an end user at their computer who has trouble that calls us, their first experience with us is going to set the tone, very likely for quite a while after that. And if we can come in as your IT service provider and be knowledgeable and be educated on the environment, then we're doing quite a bit to come across to that end user as a trusted resource, right? Which is our goal. So, this is something that, if you're in this business and you're kind of listening to this and you kind of think about it, you go, wow, this is something we should do. Well, we see it gets really good results. A lot of our clients stay with us for a very, very long time. And I can really draw that back to starting the relationship off well, doing these extended onboardings, and then really preparing both us and the client up for success from that point forward.
Excellent. Thank you, Dan and Rebecca, for sharing your expertise today. And thank you, viewers, for joining us today. Keep tuning in to Iron Edge, and we will see you next time.
Bye, everybody.